All right, so you know the major scale, you know how to apply it to the fretboard, you built it across the entire fretboard escalator across all strings, you took 2 notes away to create the pentatonic scale, but those intervals are kind of making things a little confusing. So let's simplify it even more now, and we're going to memorize these pentatonic scale shapes on the fretboard escalator before we pick up our guitar. And instead of learning and memorizing each shape, we're going to memorize by extensions, and then after that we're going to do the shapes. But first I just want to show you all 5 shapes so you get an idea of what we're going to get to eventually. So this first shape here I call the bass shape. Okay, now this bass, I don't call it major, I don't call it minor, because it can actually be applicable to both. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to call that bass. I'm not calling it major pentatonic 5, minor pentatonic 1, nothing. It's the bass shape. The next shape over, I'm going to shift the fretboard escalator so that it's always shoved up against the left side. But the next shape over is this one. So let's shift the fretboard escalator. We're just going to change keys so it's a little easier to read, and we're only looking at the left side. So that's our next shape. Now some people call that the major pentatonic position 1, but again, I'm not calling it that at all. I'm going to call that the house. This shape I call the house because it's got the house of blues, a little upside down house there. So I'm calling that the house. So beside the bass we have the house. Now we're going to shift it down again to our next shape. This shape I call the mirror. Why? Because it is 2 straight lines, and all we have is one little outlier on this side and one little outlier on that side, and it looks like it's kind of mirrored across this line here. So that is the mirror. Now you can call it Bob, it doesn't matter. I almost wrote Bob. Mirror. So our next shape there is the mirror. Okay, stay with me here. Now the next shape after that, I couldn't think of a name for it because I don't want to call it an odd shape, but it is actually the second most useful shape. The most useful being this one, the second most useful being this one. Now some people might call that a C shape pentatonic scale, but it has nothing to do with C other than it's the form of a chord C, but it just ignore all that completely. I don't like that name, so I couldn't think of a good name. So as a joke, I ended up calling it Rumpelstiltskin because Rumpelstiltskin doesn't have a name. Well, he has a name, but nobody knows it, so that was why it was funny to me. So I call that the Rumpelstiltskin shape. So I'm going to call this Rump. I know, it's a silly name, but you know what? You're going to remember it because it's a silly name. Now again, these names mean nothing. They're just ways to remember a pattern. And I don't associate letter names to it like C, G, A, whatever shape. It's not, that doesn't ring true with me. So we've got one more shape to go here, and I'm going to shuffle this down to keep it clear. Every time I do this, by the way, I'm changing keys on the fretboard escalator. This last shape here, I call it the twos. Can you figure out why? Because there's 2, 2, and 2. That's the twos. So I call that the twos. So we have the bass, we have the house, we have the mirror, we have the rump, and we have the twos. Those are our 5 shapes. I'm not even going to number them because the numbers mean nothing as well. Some people might call that 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No, we're going to call it bass, house, mirror, rump, and twos. Okay, now we're going to look at creating the entire fretboard by extending from the bass, left and to the right. So I'm going to take all the pegs out except for leaving the bass in. So I might fast forward this, but it's pretty quick. And now at first you might be like, oh my gosh, I have to put all that back in. Yeah, that's the point. You have to work. You do a little bit of work, your brain thinks and it remembers, and then when you go to play on guitar, it starts coming faster. Trust me, it's faster. So what I'm going to do, I've got my bass shape here, and I talked about extensions. Our first extension, we're going to go to the right. That was the house of blues, right? So I personally kind of start right here, right in the house. I'd build myself a little house like this. Because this is probably the most likely place you're going to play. You're going to come up here, you might bend up to that, you might slide up to that, and then get into your little house of blues. Now to finish the house shape off, it's just a straight line up. So that's easy, right? Just think about it like that. Straight line up. So now, if you're playing this bass shape, you know you can slide 2 over to that guy, 3 over to this guy. Get into your house of blues. Okay, so we just created the house shape by extending the bass shape. Very easy, right? Now let's extend that house shape to the mirror. We've already got the left side of the mirror done for us, right there. All we need is the other side of the mirror. And like we talked, there's that blank in between. So as a mirror does, it's exactly the same thing on the right side as it is the left side of this little mirror line. So if you're playing in this area, let's say you're playing, it's super simple as you go down. Now I'm not going to put that guy here. Sorry, I am going to put that guy there. This guy here gets 1 shifted to the right. That's the other side of the mirror, right? So he doesn't line up with there, he actually lines up with that one. Okay, there. And now we have our mirror shape, which was just an extension of the house. Okay, now perfect. Let's go to the left of the bass this time for the 2s, because that's a super easy one. So remember, it was just 2, 2, and 2. So I know I have 2 here. I have 2 1 fret to the left. And then I have 2 at the bottom. There. We've just built the entire pentatonic pattern across the entire fretboard escalator in minutes. All you had to do is remember those extensions. But let's say if I were to shift this 1 or 2 keys over, now I get here, I got my bass, I've got my house, and then, oh man, I've got to figure out what are my open strings to keep in that scale. Now that's the challenge that most people come across, myself included, is figuring out which open strings are going to be playable for that scale. So I hope that gives you maybe a different way to visualize and create the entire pentatonic scale across the fretboard, this time using extensions. If you like these tools, head on over to musiclabs.ca and check out how you can purchase and support them.